Hi, my name is Brian Thornton with Pat Mooney Saws, and today I'm going to show you how to change a cold saw blade on the Nishijimax high production cold saw. So the first thing you're always going to want to do before you can change the blade is engage your e-stop. That's going to shut off power and air to the machine. Once we see this light go on the safety door, we know that it's okay to open. We'll unscrew the safety latch. We can open it. Now, before we open up and clean out the inside of the saw housing, we want to make sure any contact points that the material comes into as it's getting fed and cut are clean. So that's going to include our clamp pads, both horizontal and vertical, as well as the inside saw bed and in the cutting slot where the blade actually goes inside. Now, over time, you can get increase of chips inside of here. They're going to kind of hang together like a barrel of monkeys. So you'll want to go in there with a piece of banding or a putty knife to knock that bird's nest out. So we will just make sure we wipe down all the important contact points. The number one thing you can do to keep your saw in good working order is keep it clean. This is a high production machine and it requires precision in order to operate. After we've cleaned out that area, we're going to go ahead and open the saw housing, remove the blade, and put our new blade on. So we take our 10 millimeter Allen wrench. This saw is designed to be tightened and untightened by hand. Standard threading on these, lefty-loosey. We're going to go ahead and loosen all three of these bolts first, working in a zigzag pattern. Now we can open this up. There is many reasons why we prefer to use hand tools and our hands itself to unscrew these bolts. The number one thing being we can actually tell as we loosen and then tighten these bolts whether there's any screws or excess material that have built up inside of the inside of the screw hole. As we take these out, we can inspect each one to see how they look. If you see any kind of chips or other types of material build up on it, you'll want to take those off so that you don't ruin the threading. And of course, we can also wipe these down to remove any excess oil that's been built up as the saw has been running. From here, we can open up the saw blade housing, take our wrench. This center bolt is different from the rest. This has a reverse threading, so we're not going to go left to loosen it. We're going to go to the right. As you can see, very easy to loosen it and then take everything off by hand. This makes sure that we don't put undue stress on the machine and ruin our threading. There's a lot of things you can replace. This is not one you want to. Remove our hubcap. We'll also want to check this for buildup over time. As the saw is cut, you might see some chips or excess oil. So when we see that, we want to go ahead and take that off to give us a nice, smooth, flush hold of the saw blade with the flange. We take off our old blade. So once we've removed the saw blade and we've made sure that the cutting bed is clear of any debris and buildup, we're going to want to do the same thing to the inside of our saw housing. So we'll want to clean any of the contact points, the blade guides, as well as the top part of the saw housing on both the outfeed and the infeed side to make sure it's clear from chips and gunk that will build up over time. This ensures a proper seal and makes sure that those blade guides are sitting properly around 1.5 to 2 thousandths of an inch off the saw blade. Think about it like this. If you're taking a 0.08 millimeter chip load on your blade, that equals about 0.002 thousandths of a chip. If that's in between your saw blade and the blade guides, you are not going to cut in square. Now it's time to put on the new blade. Now, when you remove the blade from the box and take out the plastic, there is a residue that's on the blade, so we're going to want to wipe that off with every blade change. This helps make sure that we're going to get a nice smooth connection inside so that nothing goes out of place. We're going to want to leave the rubber hosing on to make sure that we don't accidentally chip a tooth as we put the saw blade into the saw head. Now, how do you properly load it? The best way is to look for the Kanefusa logo at the top of that blade and make that your 12 o'clock. From here, you line up the saw blade with that center bore. And push it so that it's flush with the back of the machine. From here, we can tilt the blade to make sure that our pinholes are open so that we can put the flange on. Make sure that's properly secured. Then we can take our flange, put it on the machine, take our center bolt. Once again, we're not going to use power tools or anything like that. We're going to hand tighten it to the left. We don't need to use a hammer or any kind of power tool to make sure this is properly secured. Now, this is the most critical aspect when you're changing a saw blade, is to take out what we call the backlash. So you can see that the blade can move slightly. We're going to want to turn that counterclockwise away from the direction of the cut, so that way the pinholes are resting properly. Once we've secured the backlashes taken out, we can finish screwing down the bolt by hand, grab our wrench, and give it a few good whacks to make sure it's properly secured. From here, we can take off the rubber hosing from the outside of the blade, confident knowing we didn't accidentally chip a tooth as we were putting that on the machine. Now you'll notice it's kind of caught around the chip brush. That's okay. The next thing you'll want to check is your placement of the chip brush after we close the door. So we can see that it's covering just the tip of the blade. You only want to put it on a couple of millimeters. Once we know the chip brush is properly secured and properly placed, we'll go ahead and screw down our housing bolts. Once again, we're going to hand tighten these. If as you're screwing these bolts in, you feel any kind of resistance, you should take them out and potentially go inside to make sure no chips have cleared out. If for whatever reason you can't clear a chip out with a rag or by just kind of putting something in there to pull it out, you can use a little bit of compressed air when the saw housing is closed. We didn't use any air to clean the saw or inside of the saw housing for the precise reason of we don't want those chips blowing somewhere that they can't be. Once we've properly tightened down all the bolts, give it a nice whack. Make sure it's properly secured. No hammer needed. No torque wrenches needed. And from here, we can go ahead and move back to this control panel, set up our parameters, and run the machine. So now that we've changed our saw blade, we can go ahead and release the e-stop, turn our master on. Because we did the e-stop, we always want to double check our home position. Right now we are in home. If not, we would just simply have to press that button and manual advance. We see that our cycle ready is there. We're still in manual mode because we need to change our tooth count. We did have a 72 tooth blade on, and now we're going to switch that to a 90. So we've input 90 and press enter. Our bar diameter is 31 millimeters. So if we were changing that, we would press that. The pop-up would come up, 31. Enter. We have our cut length. We have that set at 25.4 millimeters. Our trim length is also set at 25.4 millimeters. Our feed rate should be set at 0.08 for this 1018 material. We also want to check our RPM settings. We're going to set those at 140. Blade kerf is set at 2 millimeters, and we are ready to go. Put the machine in auto and press cycle start.